Jace had never imagined he would find himself inside the royal palace of the Zainari, a species known across galaxies for their strange beauty and ruthless politics. Yet here he was, standing in a hallway that shimmered like liquid silver, the walls alive with soft lights that pulsed like the heartbeat of the building itself. His job was simple, or so he thought: deliver a small diplomatic package from a neighboring colony. But when a palace guard led him through winding corridors, each more extravagant than the last, Jace realized this visit would be far from ordinary. The air smelled sweet, like a mix of blooming flowers and warm spices, and every step he took echoed faintly, almost as if the palace itself was whispering secrets he was not meant to understand. For someone used to the rough streets of Norex Station, the contrast was dizzying. Gilded ceilings towered above him, encrusted with gemstones that caught the light and sent tiny rainbows dancing across the floor. Jace had seen wealth before, sure, but nothing like this. As he turned a corner, he nearly tripped over a small figure. The child looked no older than 5, but the glow around its head made Jace blink. The alien's skin shimmered in shades of soft blue and silver, and its large eyes reflected the palace lights like twin stars. It had no hair, but faint luminescent patterns moved across its scalp like living tattoos. And it was staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, something that made his chest tighten. "You're not from here," the child said softly, its voice musical and lilting. The words weren't hostile, just curious. Jace knelt instinctively, trying to meet the child's gaze. I'm visiting," he replied, feeling suddenly foolish. He had practiced what to say in case of trouble, but the moment stretched and he realized the words felt empty. The child's small hand extended, and before Jace could react, it pressed something cold and metallic into his palm. He looked down. A thin, polished case engraved with patterns he didn't recognize. Curious, he opened it. Inside lay a small stack of credits, 10,000 of them. Jace's jaw dropped. In all his life, he had never held so much money at once. Why?" he stammered, looking back up. "You're my new dad now?" the child said, a bright, serious smile spreading across its face. There was no hint of jest, no warning, just the certainty of a child who had made a decision that could not be undone. Jace's heart froze, then thumped wildly against his ribs. He had no idea what to say. He didn't even know this child. He had never been a father. The concept felt impossible. The palace guards, standing at a distance, did not intervene. They seemed accustomed to strange events like this, as if children handing out wealth and making impossible claims was a common occurrence in this household. Jace looked around, hopping for some explanation, but the corridor stretched endlessly, empty and echoing. The child's small hands held the case like it was the most natural thing in the universe to give away 10,000 credits, and an unasked-for responsibility. A sudden noise from a distant chamber made the child flinch slightly, then it looked back at Jace with wide eyes full of trust. That single glance shook him to his core. Here was a life that had chosen him, a being entirely unlike anyone he had ever known, placing its faith in him. The weight of that trust pressed down on him more heavily than the 10,000 credits in his hands. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was life-changing. "Why me?" Jace asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The child's smile deepened, almost mischievous now, as if it knew a secret that would reshape Jace's entire existence. "Because you're kind," it said simply, "and I like you, you're not like the others." Jace swallowed hard. The words pierced him. He had spent years moving through life unnoticed, overlooked, a ghost in a crowded universe. And now this tiny being, radiant and fearless, had singled him out. He felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest, one part fear, one part joy, and an overwhelming part of something he could not yet name: hope. For the first time in years, he imagined a future, not one filled with endless work, debt, or survival, but one with laughter, bedtime stories, and someone who believed in him. A family, perhaps. And it all began in a corridor of impossible lights, with a glowing child and a gift that made no sense but carried the weight of destiny. As the child tugged gently at his sleeve, Jace realized he had a choice: step back into the safety of his old life, or step forward into a strange new universe where a child had already chosen him. He took a deep breath, and he stepped forward. The child tugged at Jace's sleeve, pulling him down a hallway lined with mirrors that reflected 1,000 versions of the silver walls and the glowing figures within them. "Come on," it said, voice bright and insistent. I want to show you my room. Jace hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution, but the warmth in the child's gaze softened the warning. He followed, clutching the case of credits tightly, aware that each step deeper into the palace felt like leaving his old life further behind. As they walked, the palace seemed alive in ways he could not explain. The walls whispered faintly, shimmering patterns shifting as if they were watching him, guiding him. Jace kept expecting a hand to grab his shoulder or a guard to order him back, but none came. Only the child skipped ahead, completely fearless, and the soft glow of its skin painted the corridor in shades of moonlight. Finally, they reached a door that looked less formal than the rest of the palace, but somehow more personal. The child swung it open, revealing a room filled with floating toys, holographic books, and soft, glowing furniture that adjusted itself to size and comfort. At the center sat a small, round bed that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. The child rushed over and jumped onto it, laughing. "See, I like it here, but I like you more." Jace laughed nervously, the sound feeling foreign in this strange palace. "You really like me?" he asked. The child nodded enthusiastically, bouncing lightly on the bed. "You're brave, you're nice, you don't scare me." The words struck him harder than he expected. People had feared him, ignored him, or used him for years. And here was this tiny being offering trust and warmth without hesitation. Before he could respond, the door slid open again and a figure entered. A woman, regal and tall, with eyes like liquid silver, walked toward them. Jace froze. This had to be the queen. Her expression was unreadable, but she stopped just short of the bed and looked at him. "Who is this?" she asked, voice calm but carrying authority that made him straighten immediately. "This is my new dad," the child announced proudly, pointing at Jace. The queen blinked, and for the first time a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "I see," she said softly. "Well, if that is so, you must understand what it means. My child chooses wisely, but the palace is not gentle on outsiders." Jace's heart sank. He had walked into a world of wonder, but now he realized how dangerous it could be. The child's life was entangled in politics, wealth, and power. He barely understood. The queen studied him for a long moment. "Do you accept the responsibility?" she asked. The weight of her gaze pinned him in place. It was more than just childcare. This was a lifetime of protection, loyalty, and navigating dangers he could not yet see. Jace looked down at the glowing face of the child, who nodded earnestly, trusting him completely. "I'll try," Jace said finally, voice shaky but determined. The child cheered, throwing arms around his neck. The queen's eyes softened slightly, as if that single moment of courage told her everything she needed to know. "Very well," she said. "Then you shall be tested. The palace has ways of knowing whether someone is worthy of my child's trust." Jace swallowed hard. Before he could question her, the walls shifted. The mirrors along the corridor began to ripple, and a soft wind seemed to rise from the floor. Strange, ethereal shapes appeared, moving in patterns that made the air feel alive. The child clung to his arm. "It's okay," it whispered. "You're with me now. You can do it." The first test came suddenly. A set of doors slid open to reveal a chamber filled with holographic projections, creatures, machinery, and environments that seemed both real and unreal. Jace had no idea how to navigate this. He moved slowly, trying to understand the patterns. The child laughed and bounced beside him, guiding him instinctively. "Step here, don't touch that," it said, pointing at a glowing floor panel that seemed harmless but emitted a sharp, electric spark when touched. Hours, or maybe minutes, time seemed different here, passed as Jace followed the child's lead. Each challenge tested his instincts, patience, and courage, and with every success the child's trust grew, shining in its eyes brighter than any light in the palace. Jace felt something shift inside him, a sense of purpose he had never known. He was no longer drifting through life. He had a reason, a mission, and someone who believed in him completely. By the end, Jace collapsed onto the soft bed, exhausted but exhilarated. The child curled up beside him, small and warm, and whispered, "See, you're good at this, you're my dad." Jace hugged it tightly, a tear sliding down his cheek. He realized that this strange palace, these impossible trials, and the glowing child had already changed him forever. He was no longer just a man wandering through the stars. He was someone who mattered, someone chosen. And for the first time, Jace felt like he truly belonged somewhere. The next morning, the palace was quieter than Jace expected. The silver corridors glimmered under the pale light of the twin suns outside, but an unusual tension hung in the air. Guards moved with silent precision, whispering to each other in a language Jace could not understand. The child, oblivious to the tension, bounced along beside him, humming a strange melody. "Come on, Dad, I want to show you the garden," it said, tugging at his hand. Jace followed, though unease knotted his stomach. He had been chosen, trusted, and celebrated, but now he felt the invisible weight of scrutiny pressing down on him. The palace was not just a home. It was a kingdom with secrets, rivalries, and dangers he had no experience facing. He remembered the queen's words, "The palace has ways of knowing whether someone is worthy." He realized that today might be one of those ways. The garden was unlike any he had ever seen. Towers of bioluminescent plants spiraled into the sky, their colors shifting like liquid rainbows. Streams of sparkling water wound between floating stones, and delicate creatures with translucent wings flitted between flowers. The child ran ahead, laughing, but Jace noticed a shadow lurking near the far edge of the garden. He instinctively stiffened, stepping closer to the child. "You're scared," the child said, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "But that's okay. I like that you feel it. It means you care." Jace smiled weakly, his hand resting on the child's small shoulder. "I care," he said, the words carrying more weight than he expected. "More than I ever thought I could." Before they could move further, the shadow detached itself from the plants. A tall figure draped in dark robes, face hidden behind a smooth mask. Jace's heart pounded. The figure spoke, its voice low and chilling. "So this is the one the child chose, the outsider." Jace stepped in front of the child instinctively. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure tilted its head as if amused by his bravado. "I am a friend of the palace," it said, though its tone suggested otherwise. "And I am here to test you." The child clutched his hand tightly, its glow intensifying. "It's okay," it said softly. "We can do this together." Jace took a deep breath. He didn't know what this test would be or what the consequences might be if he failed, but looking at the small being who had chosen him, he felt a courage he had never known. "All right," he said, voice steady, "let's go." The figure moved, and suddenly the garden around them shifted. Paths twisted impossibly, plants rearranged themselves, and creatures with sharp claws appeared from nowhere. Jace had to think fast. He grabbed the child and ran, ducking under a swinging vine that glowed red with danger. The child pointed and shouted directions, moving with a natural grace that Jace could barely keep up with. Every instinct he had was pushed to its limit. As they reached a small clearing, the figure confronted them again. "You are brave," it said, voice echoing, "but bravery alone is not enough. Do you understand the responsibilities you have chosen?" Jace looked down at the child, who nodded confidently. "Yes," he said firmly, "I do, and I will protect them, no matter what." The figure studied him, silent for a long moment. Then it stepped back, fading into the shadows. The garden returned to its peaceful state, the glowing flowers resuming their gentle dance, the streams sparkling once more. The child jumped into Jace's arms, hugging him tightly. "You did it! You're strong! You're my dad!" it cheered, voice full of joy. Jace held the child close, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and love unlike anything he had ever experienced. But as they walked back to the palace, Jace couldn't shake a lingering thought. The test had been dangerous, far more than he had expected. Someone or something had wanted to see if he could protect the child. And if this was only the beginning, what challenges lay ahead in the vast, complex world of the palace? He realized that being a father here was not just about care or love. It was about courage, wisdom, and the willingness to face threats he could barely imagine. As the palace doors closed behind them, Jace looked down at the small, glowing face beside him. The child's trust was unwavering, its faith in him absolute. He clenched his jaw and nodded silently. He had been chosen for a reason. He would rise to the challenge, no matter the danger. For the first time, Jace truly understood what it meant to be responsible for another life, and he was ready to fight for it, whatever the cost. The palace felt heavier now. What had seemed magical and welcoming in the beginning had started to show its true colors, a place of power, politics, and endless secrets. Jace followed the child through hallways filled with statues of long-dead rulers, each one staring down with cold, stone eyes. He realized that every corner of this palace held a story, and not all of them were kind. "You're quiet today, Dad," the child said, tugging at his sleeve. Its glow seemed dimmer, more thoughtful. "Are you tired?" Jace smiled faintly, forcing cheer into his voice. "I'm just thinking," he said. The child tilted its head, sensing the weight in him, though it didn't fully understand the dangers lurking behind the beauty of this place. They entered a grand hall, where nobles in flowing robes and sharp masks had gathered. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made Jace's chest tighten. Whispers rose and fell like wind over stones. The child ran ahead, unafraid, waving at some figures who ignored them completely. Jace, however, felt the piercing eyes of the courtiers. He realized quickly that his presence was not entirely welcomed. An outsider had been accepted by the child, but the palace had not forgiven him for being an intruder. A stern-looking advisor approached, his robe embroidered with silver threads that caught the light. "You have taken responsibility for the child," he said, his tone formal and unreadable. "Do you understand the obligations?" Jace nodded. "Yes," he said firmly. "I will do whatever it takes to protect them." The advisor's eyes narrowed slightly, as though he were measuring the truth of his words. Then he smiled, thin and cold. "We shall see." The child, oblivious to the tension, skipped to a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. "Dad, look, it's beautiful." Its laughter filled the air, bright and pure, and Jace felt his heart ache at the contrast between the innocence of this being and the danger surrounding them. He wanted to shield the child from every worry, every shadow, but he knew the palace would not allow such safety. This was a world of hidden knives and shifting alliances, and even love could not keep them entirely safe. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jace found himself alone in the palace library, a massive room filled with floating holographic tomes and scrolls that shimmered with knowledge. He ran his fingers along the glowing texts, realizing that understanding this place would take more than courage, it would take wisdom. The child appeared silently, climbing onto a table beside him. "What are you doing?" it asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "I'm trying to learn," Jace admitted. "There's so much here, so much I don't understand, but I need to, for you." The child reached out, placing a small, warm hand on his arm. "You'll figure it out, you always do." The confidence in that tiny voice gave him a strange strength, a reminder that he was no longer alone in facing the challenges ahead. The next day, the palace sent him on a mission no outsider had ever attempted, to negotiate with a neighboring planet that had long been at odds with the Zainari. Jace felt fear curling in his stomach, but he thought of the child and the trust that tiny being had placed in him. If he failed, it wasn't just his life at stake. It was the safety and future of someone who had called him Dad. He met the delegation in a room filled with low, humming lights. The aliens across the table were cold and suspicious, questioning his every word, testing his intentions. Jace realized that being a father in this palace wasn't just about protection. It was about respect, authority, and strength. Each answer he gave had to be measured, calm, and decisive. And with every carefully chosen word, he remembered the child's glowing eyes, the smile that had changed everything for him. When he returned to the palace, exhausted but triumphant, the child ran to him, wrapping tiny arms around his waist. "You did it! You're amazing, Dad!" Jace hugged the small being tightly, tears stinging his eyes. In that moment, he realized something profound. The palace, with all its danger, intrigue, and tests, was not just a place of trials. It was the place where he could grow into the person the child needed him to be. As night fell, Jace stood at the balcony, holding the glowing child close. Stars twinkled above, distant and endless, reminding him that the universe was vast and full of unknowns. But for the first time in his life, he felt grounded. He had a purpose, a family, and a reason to face every shadow, every threat, no matter how daunting. The palace had tried to intimidate him, to test his courage and resolve. But Jace had discovered something stronger than fear: love. And that love, fragile yet fierce, would carry him through every trial to come. The palace had grown quiet that morning, but an unease hung in the air, heavier than the usual grandeur. Jace was walking through the corridors with the child skipping beside him, unaware of the subtle glances from the guards. Something felt wrong. The child's glow flickered slightly, a tiny ripple of fear, and Jace tightened his hold on its hand. The palace had welcomed him, tested him, and challenged him. But now he realized that it could also be dangerous in ways he hadn't yet imagined. Suddenly, a loud alarm echoed through the halls. Red lights flashed, painting the silver walls in ominous streaks. Jace's heart raced. The child clung to him tightly, and the glow that usually radiated warmth now pulsed with urgency. "Dad, what's happening?" the child whispered, voice trembling slightly. Jace forced a calmness he didn't feel. I don't know, he said softly, but we'll face it together, I promise. They ran toward the central courtyard where a group of masked intruders had appeared. The palace guards were struggling to contain them, but the intruders moved with unnatural precision, like shadows given life. One of them lunged toward the child. Jace didn't hesitate. He threw himself in front of the small figure, shielding it with his own body. Pain shot through his arm, but he didn't care. The child's wide eyes stared at him, a mixture of shock and awe. "Dad!" it cried. Jace pushed the intruder back, using everything he had learned from the palace tests: instinct, courage, and determination. He realized that these were not ordinary attackers. They were trained, disciplined, and intent on taking the child. Every step he took, every movement was fueled by one thought: protect this life that had chosen him. He had never felt such clarity, such raw, consuming purpose before. The child, despite fear, grabbed his hand and whispered urgently, "We can do it together. Remember what we practiced." Jace nodded, and together they moved through the courtyard, dodging traps, outsmarting the intruders, and staying ahead of danger. Each time the child directed him, his heart swelled with pride. This small, glowing being trusted him completely, and he would not let it down. Finally, they reached the palace gates, but a large figure blocked their way. Jace stepped forward, standing tall despite trembling knees. "You will not touch them," he said firmly, voice steady with conviction. The intruder laughed, but the sound lacked warmth, only menace. "You are only an outsider," the figure said. "What hope do you have against us?" Jace looked down at the child, its small hand gripping his arm tightly. He realized that hope wasn't something given, it was something created. It was courage, determination, and love all mixed into one. He drew a deep breath and charged, using strategy and quick thinking to throw the intruder off balance. The child followed, guiding him with movements and directions, their partnership seamless. Together, they forced the intruder back, finally retreating into the shadows. When the courtyard fell silent again, Jace collapsed onto the soft grass, pulling the child close. The glow from its skin bathed him in warmth, washing away the fear and leaving only relief. You were amazing," the child said, eyes wide with admiration. "No, we were amazing," Jace corrected, smiling despite exhaustion. "Together." As they rose to their feet, the queen appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "You have proven yourself," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Not just in courage, but in heart. The palace has never seen such unity between a guardian and the child." Jace felt a warmth spread through him. This was more than recognition. It was acknowledgement that he belonged, that he had earned his place. That night, as the palace lights dimmed and shadows receded, Jace sat in the child's room, holding it close. The attacks had shaken him, but they had also cemented something powerful, a bond forged in danger and trust. He realized that being a father in this palace was not just about love or protection. It was about standing firm when fear and uncertainty threatened to overwhelm, about being the shield the child needed even when the world turned against them. The child's small voice broke the quiet. "I knew you would keep me safe, Dad. I always knew." Jace kissed the top of its head, feeling tears sting his eyes. "And I will," he whispered. "Every day, no matter what comes." For the first time, Jace truly understood the depth of his role. He wasn't just a visitor, a passerby, or an outsider. He was a protector, a father, a chosen one, and the palace, with all its dangers and wonders, would never again make him feel small. He had found his purpose, and nothing could take it away. Days passed after the attack, but the palace never truly returned to peace. Every corridor, every shimmering wall seemed to hum with tension. Jace walked alongside the child, now more aware than ever of the dangers surrounding them. Yet, despite the constant threat, a bond had grown stronger between them. The child's glow seemed brighter, more confident, reflecting the trust and connection they had forged together. One evening, the queen summoned Jace to a private chamber. The room was smaller than he expected, filled with ancient artifacts and floating lights that danced across the walls. The queen's face was softer than he had ever seen, but her eyes held the weight of responsibility. "Jace," she said, "the attacks were only the beginning. The palace hides secrets that few outsiders could ever survive, and you, by choosing this child, have stepped into a storm far greater than you imagine." Jace swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice steady despite the fear curling in his stomach. "I promise the child I won't fail." The queen nodded slowly, a shadow of relief crossing her features. Very well, then you must understand the palace, its allies, and its enemies. Only then can you truly protect what you have chosen. That night, Jace and the child returned to their quarters. The small being climbed into his lap, its glow pulsating softly against his chest. "Dad," it said, voice trembling slightly, "are you scared?" Jace held it close, feeling the warmth of trust and innocence radiating from its body. "I am," he admitted. "But I also know that being scared doesn't mean I won't protect you. Fear makes me stronger, not weaker." The child smiled, leaning into him. "I like that about you," it whispered. "You're real, you care, you're brave even when you're scared." The words filled Jace with a mix of pride and awe. He had never imagined anyone could see him, not just for his strength, but for his heart. And now this tiny being, glowing and fearless, saw him completely. The following days brought new challenges. The palace revealed hidden rooms, secret passages, and ancient guardians, mechanical beings that tested every skill, every instinct Jace had developed. Each trial forced him to think, to act, to trust both himself and the child completely. And with every success, their bond deepened. The child laughed more freely, its glow brighter than ever, a reflection of the safety and love Jace provided. But then came the final trial, a room filled with illusions, visions of failure, danger, and loss. Jace found himself facing not enemies outside, but fears within, losing the child, failing its trust, being unworthy of the love it had placed in him. Shadows formed into faces he recognized from his past, friends he had failed, moments he had regretted. Each one whispered doubt into his mind, trying to break him. The child's voice cut through the darkness. "Dad, look at me, I'm here, we're together." Jace gripped the small hand, feeling the warmth and light anchor him. "I won't let you go," he said, voice strong despite the fear pressing in. He realized then that the trial was not about physical skill or cunning. It was about the heart, about love, and about the unbreakable bond between them. He stepped forward, holding the child close, and the illusions shattered like glass. Light filled the room, pure and brilliant, and Jace felt a calm wash over him. He had faced his deepest fears, and he had not wavered. The child's glow enveloped him completely, a sign that the trial had been passed. He was no longer just chosen, he was worthy. When they returned to the Queen, she studied them silently for a long moment. Then she spoke, voice soft but resolute. "You have proven yourself, Jace. Not as a visitor, not as an outsider, but as a guardian, a father. The palace has accepted you, and so has my child. Nothing can break what has been forged here." Jace looked down at the small, glowing face, eyes shining with trust and joy. He realized in that moment that he had found something greater than any wealth or power in the universe. He had found a family, a purpose, and a love that transcended fear, danger, and doubt. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine the future, not just for himself, but for the child who had chosen him, and for the life they would build together. The palace, with all its trials and secrets, had tested him, and he had emerged stronger, braver, and unshakably determined. Jace hugged the child tightly, whispering, "We made it, together." The glow of the small being reflected in his eyes, a promise of hope, love, and courage that would never fade. The palace was calm at last, bathed in the golden light of dawn spilling through towering windows. Jace stood on a balcony, the child perched on his shoulder, its small fingers gripping his shirt. The events of the past days, the trials, the attacks, the fear, the triumph, felt almost like a distant dream now. Yet the glow of the child reminded him that everything had been real, every danger faced, every moment of courage, and every heartbeat of trust that had brought them here. "I can see everything from here," the child said, pointing to the sparkling gardens below, the floating fountains, and the city beyond the palace walls. "It's beautiful." Jace smiled, wrapping an arm around its tiny frame. "Yes," he said softly, "but the most beautiful part is having someone to share it with." The child turned, eyes wide and shining, and threw its arms around him. In that embrace, Jace felt more than love. He felt a connection that had been forged through fear, trials, and choice. He was no longer alone in the universe, and he never would be again. The Queen appeared beside them, her presence calm and dignified. She watched silently for a moment, then said, "You have done what no outsider has done before, Jace. You faced the palace's tests, protected my child through danger, and found courage where many would falter. You are not just worthy, you are family." Her words carried weight, but they also carried warmth. Jace felt something swell in his chest, pride, relief, and a sense of belonging he had never known before. The child giggled and looked up at him. "Dad, we did it! We really did it!" Its glow seemed to shimmer even brighter, reflecting pure joy. Jace laughed, ruffling its glowing patterns. "Yes, we did, together always." The words felt right in a way that nothing else ever had. He had lived a life of drifting and doubt, of being overlooked and underestimated. But now, in this palace filled with secrets and wonders, he had earned a place that mattered, a place as protector, as parent, as someone loved and trusted completely. As they descended to the palace gardens, Jace noticed that the courtiers and guards no longer regarded him with suspicion. There were nods of respect, subtle gestures of acknowledgement, as if the entire palace recognized that he had earned his place through courage and heart. And through it all, the child skipped ahead, laughing and pointing at flowers that glowed like jewels in the morning sun. Jace followed, smiling, feeling a warmth in his chest that was unshakable. They came to a quiet fountain at the center of the garden. The water sparkled with a rainbow of colors, reflecting both the light and the palace above. The child climbed onto the edge and looked at Jace, its glow illuminating the determined, tired but proud expression on his face. "I chose you," it said softly, "and I'm glad I did." Jace knelt beside the fountain, holding the child's hands gently. "And I chose you," he replied, his voice steady and full of emotion. "I always will. You're my family, my reason, my world." A soft breeze swept through the garden, lifting their hair and clothing, as if the universe itself acknowledged the bond between them. Jace realized then that this palace, with its endless trials, dangers, and mysteries, had given him something far greater than riches or power. It had given him purpose, love, and a chance to be more than he ever believed he could be. The 10,000 credits, the tests, the attacks, they were all part of a journey that led him to this single truth. He was not alone, and he never would be again. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the city and the palace, Jace lifted the child into his arms and spun it around. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the sound of water and the whispers of the palace walls. For the first time in his life, Jace felt whole. He had a family, a home, and a purpose that was bigger than fear, bigger than survival. He had been chosen, and he had chosen back, and that choice would define both of their lives forever. Finally, standing together by the fountain, Jace whispered, "No matter what comes, we face it together, always." The child hugged him tightly, and in that embrace, Jace understood the simple, unshakable truth. Love, trust, and courage could make anyone unstoppable, even in a palace of wonders and dangers. And in that moment, Jace knew that this was just the beginning of their life together. A life filled with hope, laughter, and an unbreakable bond that nothing in the galaxy could ever undo. They walked back toward the palace, side by side, the child's glow lighting their path. And as they entered the grand doors, Jace felt a sense of peace that he had never known in his entire life. He was home. He was chosen. He was a father.